everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be talking about Redux, which is a state management library. But honestly, it is so much more than that. Now, I'll keep it super simple in this video, just enough to get you started. But trust me, Redux is a pretty big topic. Once you get the hang of the basics, there is a lot of room to play around and use your imagination to build even more powerful applications. Alright, let's not waste any more time and jump straight in. Redux is an advanced state management library that helps manage the application state in a predictable and in a centralized way. And this is not something which is only related to ReactJS. Actually, it can be used with other backend technologies as well, like Node.js Express, Django, Flask, and Spring Boot. Now, when it comes to ReactJS, we have react-redux. This is a library that connects Redux with React, making it easier to manage state in React applications. Now, can we just try to understand with the help of an example? We have a left-hand side where you see without Redux, and on the right-hand side you see with Redux. So imagine you have a large family and you need to pass a message from one family member, let's say at the top, to someone at the bottom. So instead of delivering it directly, you pass the message through every person in the hierarchy until it reaches the recipient. This is how the data flows in React without Redux. Each component must pass the data to the next, even if they don't need it, which can be tedious and messy. And this concept is called as prop drilling. If something changes, you might need to resend the message through the entire chain. Let's now take a look at the right-hand side. Now imagine there is a family group chat where everyone can directly post or read messages. If someone wants to send or update information, they simply add it to the chat and everyone gets it instantly. This is how React works with Redux. Instead of manually passing the data through every component, there will be a central store. For example, the group chat. This will hold the state. Any component can directly access and updates the store, making communication faster, easier, and even more organized. Alright, so there are certain technical terms related to React Redux. I'll start from the first one. Imagine you are at a restaurant and you order a dish from the menu. That order is the action. It tells the restaurant what you want to eat, like I want to order a pizza. In Redux, an action is a message that tells the application this is what should happen, like adding the item to your cart. Then we have a dispatch, which is like the waiter who takes your order to the kitchen. The waiter receives your order, that is the action, and delivers it to the kitchen for preparation. So kitchen here will be the reducer. In Redux, dispatch sends your action to the reducer, which will further process it and change the state. Okay, so in other words, we can say that reducer is like a chef in the kitchen. When the kitchen, that is the reducer, gets your order, it decides what to do with it. For example, if you order a pizza, the chef prepares the pizza and puts it on your table. In Redux, the reducer takes the action, that is your order, looks at the current state, that is the menu, or maybe the existing orders, and decide how to update the state. For example, like adding the pizza to your order. And final one is a state. So a state is just like restaurants order list or the menu. It holds all the information about what's on your table, maybe your current order. For example, it tracks what food items you have ordered. So in Redux, the state is where all the data lives. For example, your current shopping cart, or maybe the list of dishes you have ordered. So when your order is added, the state is updated. Alright, so let's be a little technical here. Whenever your application wants a change in the state, we call an action creator. An action creator produces an action. An action is nothing but an object setting up information about our data which is moving into the state. Then we have the dispatch, which is a function which acts as a bridge between our actions and the reducers, hence sending the information over to our application. So then we have the reducers. The function reducer receives the data information from the action through this dispatch and modifies the state according to whatever the data is being provided. And finally, we have the state where the data will be modified. This is where all the data from our reducers are passed into. I hope this was enough to get started. Let's move on to the practical part. I hope this was enough to get started. Let's move ahead with the practical. The first step that we require is we need to install the ReactJS Toolkit, which provides modern tools for Redux development, and also react-redux, which is the library that will connect Redux with your React components. So we are going to write down the command npm install. We need @redux.js /toolkit, and we need to also install the React Redux. It will take a while. We'll come back once it gets installed. Great, it has been installed. Now we can start our application, and once you must check that whether you have got your Redux.js toolkit installed and also the React Redux installed. So yeah, they have been installed. We have successfully executed our very first step. Now next step is that we need to create a Redux store. This Redux store can have any kind of functionality, but the functionality that we want is managing the state of a simple counter application. So we are only going to implement a very simple counter app because this is just the start, as I already discussed in the beginning of the video. So let's create a store.js file inside src store.js. So the very first thing that we require is importing the configure store from the Redux.js toolkit. I won't be going that much deep into what exactly is this, but yes, it would be enough to know that it's a function provided by Redux Toolkit that simplifies the process of setting up a Redux store. Okay, let's move on. The next thing that we require is to define the action types. So I'm going to create two constants. One is increment. I use the string increment, and second one is decrement. and I'll assign the string as decrement. Increment will increment the counter while decrement will decrement the counter. Now next we require is the initial state of the counter. Let's say initial const initial state equals to, which is an object with a count property set to 0. Now let's create a function. I'm going to create the function as counter reducer. So inside this function, I will be having a state as equal to initial state and also an action. So if you remember about the use reducer, inside use reducer also we used to have a reducer function. So that's this reducer function that we are creating. This will contain a switch statement wherein we will have the action along with the type property. We are going to create the cases. So first case is increment. We are going to return the count as state.count property plus 1, and the next case is case decrement. Return, we have return count as state.count minus 1, and also we need to have a default case as usual, and that will be return state. Now let's create our store using const store equals to configure store, which is a function where we are going to pass the property reducer and using its value as the counter reducer function. All right, so the next thing is that we need to export our store by using export default store and also export our increment and decrement constants. We are done with our second step. Now the next, that is the third step, will be our actual component that we'll be creating inside the components folder. We will name it as Redux counter.js and use rfce to create your function component. So now we also need to import two hooks, that is useSelector and useDispatch from the react-redux. So what are these? useSelector is the hook that is used to read the data from the Redux store, and useDispatch is the function which is used to dispatch the actions to modify the Redux store. All right, let's proceed. We need to now import our two constants. The two constants are increment and decrement from the store. So we are having // because store is not inside the components folder, it is directly inside the src. So we put / because we are required to move to the parent component. Now inside the Redux counter, we need to create a variable const count equals to, we have to use the useSelector wherein we pass state, and this returns state.count. In other words, this receives the current state of the Redux store and returns the part of the state you want to access. Now, this hook subscribes to the Redux store and the component will re-render whenever the selected part of the state changes. Now, next we have to create another variable, and that is const dispatch, that actually holds your useDispatch function, which is a hook. We created this dispatch function because we want to send actions to the Redux store to trigger the state updates. You can call the dispatch and pass it an action. The action will be processed by the reducer to update the state. Now, after this, we require to, let's delete this from here. Let's have a heading. It's h1 and counter should be set to, that is count variable. Now we require two buttons. So wherein the first button will be the increment button, while the second one will be the decrement button. We need to use the onClick event and call the dispatch function. We need to pass the callback for this. Let's use dispatch, inside which we have to specify the type. We need to mention the increment constant. And then we need, for the second one, pass the callback, use the dispatch, pass the type as the decrement. Now we have our fourth step where we need to open index.js and we are required to import the provider component from the react-redux. So what is this? This component from the react-redux library is essential for integrating Redux with your React application. So this component is used to wrap your entire React application and makes the Redux store available to all the components in your app. It essentially provides the Redux store to your React component tree so that the components can access the store and interact with it using the hooks like useSelector and useDispatch. So, what are we waiting for? Let's wrap our application inside the provider component. And right, we are also required to import the store from /store, and we need to use the store props and access the store. We can say that this is holding your React application's state. This line simply ensures that the application knows where to find the state and how to manage actions for modifying the state. Now let's move ahead to our final step and the fifth step, and that is we need to import our function. Let's take a look on the browser. So we can see that we got our counter. When we increment, it increments, and when we decrement, it decrements. In this video, we learned how to set up a Redux store and manage state in a React application. We went through creating actions reducers and connecting them to our React components to manage the state efficiently. Redux gives us a centralized way to handle our app's data flow, making it easier to maintain and scale as the application grows. I hope this video helped you in understanding the core concepts of Redux and how to apply them in your own projects. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to NavWebDev for more tutorials.